New York pulses at a rhythm few can keep up with. The streets are always crowded, the skyscrapers seem to touch the sky, and every corner holds invisible stories, lost amid the rush of the crowd. Amid honking horns, flashing signs, and hurried footsteps, life goes on as if it were a grand spectacle in which no one wants to miss the lead role. But, as in every spectacle, there are those who don't even have the right to enter the stage. People who live on the margins, invisible, reduced to mere shadows that others prefer not to see. It was on one of these busy streets, between elegant cafes and shop windows displaying expensive clothing, that an unexpected scene began to unfold. Sitting on the cold floor in a corner was a woman most would pass by without noticing. Worn clothes, disheveled hair, a distant look in her eyes. To many, she was just another homeless person among the hundreds who inhabit the city's sidewalks. But, for one man in particular, she wasn't just invisible, she was a source of laughter. A well-dressed businessman with an impeccable suit and gleaming watch stood before her with a wry smile on his face. In his hand he held a cup of imported coffee, still steaming, and his tone of voice echoed amid the hustle and bustle of the street. "That beggar doesn't know anything," he said, loud enough for others around him to hear. "I bet she can't even write her own name." The comment provoked laughter from some nearby, as if it were normal to mock those who already had nothing. The woman, however, remained motionless, her eyes fixed on an undefined point as if she hadn't heard. The businessman, thinking he was being witty, continued. He asked her defiantly if she knew anything about the world, about books, about art. "I doubt you know who Shakespeare was," he mocked, his scornful laugh louder than the sirens and footsteps filling the avenue. And it's precisely here that this story begins to change. Because within seconds that man and everyone around him would discover something they couldn't forget. If this story is already intriguing you, take advantage and subscribe to the channel right now. Activate the bell and leave your like. This way, you help more people receive stories that touch the heart and make us reflect. Because what happened next, on that ordinary New York street corner, would transform not only the image of that woman, but also the way everyone around her began to look at her and at themselves. Until that moment, for most people, that figure sitting on the sidewalk was nothing more than another sad portrait of the social inequality that New York shamelessly displays. The rush of executives, the tourists with cameras in hand, the students crossing the streets with headphones on, everyone learns to look away. It's as if, unconsciously, the city teaches its inhabitants to ignore the pain of others. And so, that woman had become a ghost in broad daylight. She passed unnoticed through the crowd, invisible as if she didn't exist. Her clothes were worn, in disheveled layers that didn't protect her from the biting cold. Her hands, calloused and stained, held a cloth bag where she kept the few remaining belongings of her life. But there was something in her gaze that, if one really allowed oneself to look, revealed that behind that miserable appearance lay a story. It wasn't just a face lost in the statistics of poverty. It was a life that bore scars, memories, dreams, and pain. Who was that woman? This question echoed in silence, though no one had the courage to voice it. Perhaps because the answer was uncomfortable. Perhaps because acknowledging her humanity would require facing one's own indifference head-on. The truth is, before she sat there on the cold cement, she had been someone with a voice, presence, and knowledge. But the weight of life, the losses, the traumas, the tortuous paths that fate imposed, pushed her toward that cruel reality. All of this, however, was hidden behind the stigma of being just the beggar on the corner. And it wasn't just the arrogant businessman who underestimated her. How many others had passed by without even imagining that this woman harbored a secret that could disarm any prejudice? How many had judged her as incapable, useless, or even unworthy of compassion? The scene that was beginning to form wasn't just about a rich man laughing at a homeless person. It was about how society as a whole, every day, chooses to laugh, ignore, or simply turn a blind eye. And that's precisely why what was about to happen would be so remarkable. Because in an instant, that invisible woman would become the center of attention, and not out of pity, not out of charity, but for something much greater. The power of words, the power of art, the power of the human soul. If you also believe that every person has a story worth hearing, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. Stories like this deserve to be shared because they remind us that no one is truly who they seem. And it was in this scenario of indifferent looks and deep-rooted prejudices that the woman, for the first time, would raise her voice. Surprising, even the businessman who had laughed at her seconds before. While the woman sat almost motionless, the businessman seemed to revel in his own cruelty. His laughter echoed off the glass walls of the stores, drawing the attention of passers-by. For him, this was no ordinary moment, but an opportunity to reinforce his position of superiority over everyone. Tall, imposing, wearing an impeccable dark suit and a coat that betrayed his wealth, he displayed every detail of his presence as if it were a trophy. The watch on his wrist glinted with every movement of his hand, reflecting the city lights, and the leather briefcase he carried seemed to symbolize not only his work but also his authority. He was the living portrait of someone who believed he had achieved everything on his own, and therefore felt entitled to judge those who possessed nothing. "You probably can't even write your own name," he repeated, this time looking at the curious onlookers who were beginning to gather. It's sad to see people like that, completely ignorant. His tone was laced with irony, and the way he emphasized his words made it clear he wasn't just talking to her. He wanted an audience. He wanted everyone to see the spectacle of humiliation he was creating. And unfortunately, some laughed along, as if someone's suffering were casual entertainment. The businessman then decided to go further. He approached, leaned in, and delivered the provocation he believed to be definitive. "Tell me, beggar, do you know who Shakespeare was? Or is that just a street name for you?" The silence that followed seemed to announce that the answer would be obvious. Nothing. He expected just one more moment of emptiness, confirming his thesis that this woman was incapable of anything. For him, it would be the final proof of his superiority. But there was something strange about that pause. The woman's distant gaze betrayed neither submission nor shame. There was an unexpected calm, as if she were waiting for the right moment to speak, and this detail went unnoticed by almost everyone, except fate, which seemed ready to reverse the roles in a matter of seconds. If this story is already captivating, take the opportunity to subscribe to the channel right now and leave your like beer. This way, you help spread stories that make us reflect on life, our choices, and the human value we so often overlook. Because what that woman would say next would not only silence the businessman's laughter, but would also deeply mark everyone there, and soon, millions of people around the world. Silence hung in the air. The businessman smiled sarcastically, certain he had won this unequal duel. Curious passers-by expected just another awkward gesture, perhaps a lost look or a timid attempt to beg. But suddenly the atmosphere changed. The woman slowly raised her head. Her eyes, previously downcast and distant, now shone with an unexpected intensity. It was as if a forgotten flame had been rekindled in that instant. Unhurriedly, she parted her lips and, in a firm, clear, and surprisingly melodious voice, began to recite. To be or not to be, that is the question. The murmur of the streets seemed to cease. The distant honking, the hurried conversations, the incessant footsteps, everything was swallowed up by those words. It wasn't just a mechanical repetition of memorized phrases. Every syllable carried emotion, every pause carried weight, every intonation revealed a profound mastery of what was being said. People stopped. Some who were already walking to the subway turned back to see where the voice was coming from. Others, holding their phones, instinctively started recording. It was impossible to believe that this woman, ridiculed seconds before, could recite Shakespeare with such eloquence. The businessman, who had previously displayed a confident smile, was now paralyzed. The laughter froze on his face, and the hot coffee he held nearly spilled from his trembling hands. His eyes, wide, betrayed a shock beyond words, and she continued as if on an invisible stage. What is nobler for the spirit, to suffer the arrows and flings of outrageous fortune, or To arm oneself against a sea of pain and facing it put an end to it. The contrast was brutal. This woman who seemed to have nothing revealed an immeasurable wealth of soul, of culture, of memory. Each sentence drew a gasp, a look of surprise, a shiver from the crowd. There were even discreet tears in the eyes of some who recognized the transformative power of those words. And the more she recited, the more evident it became that it wasn't a coincidence. It wasn't an improvised scene or a vague memory. It was talent. It was knowledge. It was the mark of someone who had lived among books, stages, and classrooms. It was an erudition the businessman never imagined finding in someone he had reduced to a stereotype. In that moment, it wasn't her who was being exposed. It was him. The arrogance, the prejudice, the cruelty. Everything was turned against the businessman, who was now just a small man before the unexpected greatness blossoming from the cold sidewalk. And as for the crowd, there was no more laughter. Only silence, admiration, and a deep respect that welled up with force. What happened next only heightened the power of that scene. But it was already clear. No one would ever forget the moment an invisible woman transformed a New York street corner into a Shakespearean stage. If this scene has touched you, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. This way, you'll help spread stories that make us think about true human value and the power that can reside where we least expect it. And it was precisely the reaction of those people around, some crying, others applauding, that would give even more weight to what was happening. The echo of Shakespeare's words still reverberated in the air when a detail began to draw attention. The people nearby, who had been watching in silence until then, began to react. A woman covered her mouth with her hands, her eyes brimming with tears. A young drama student passing by simply dropped his backpack on the ground and froze, as if he were in front of an outdoor theater class. Cell phones rose in sync, recording every moment. What had once been just an everyday scene of arrogance and prejudice now became a public spectacle, one of those rare moments that made everyone forget the rush. Traffic moved on. Lights changed, but everyone's attention was riveted to the sidewalk, where an invisible woman loomed large. Some began to applaud timidly. Others murmured phrases like, "Unbelievable. This is wonderful. How can this be?" That Shakespeare passage, recited with such power and truth, touched the most sensitive nerves of each audience member. It didn't matter whether they knew the original work or not. What mattered was the emotion conveyed. And the businessman? He, once so confident, now seemed smaller than ever, his eyes averted from the scene as if searching for a hiding place. What was supposed to be a public humiliation of his wife had turned into a cruel exposure of his own ignorance. As the impromptu audience grew, the energy of the place changed. The cold seemed less intense, the rush less urgent. People who had never spoken to each other exchanged knowing glances, as if sharing a secret. They were witnessing something that could not be repeated. And then someone started filming from closer, up and broadcasting it live. Within minutes, the video had gained traction on social media. Comments poured in, "What an incredible scene. This is a slap in the face to arrogance. True wisdom is not in the pocket, but in the soul." What began as an isolated act on a New York street corner soon became a message to the world. But more than the virality, what really mattered was the immediate effect on the hearts of those present. Many approached, not to offer alms, but to say thank you. One young man left a handwritten note. "Thank you for reminding me that beauty can be found anywhere." A woman bowed in respect, as if before a great actress on a consecrated stage, and so the woman who had been ignored for so long was now recognized not for what she wore, but for what she carried inside. Have you ever witnessed a scene that transformed the way you see the world? Tell me in the comments. I'd love to hear about your experience. And of course, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so more stories like this can reach more hearts. Because behind that unexpected performance, there was an even greater revelation. Who, after all, was this woman? What life story had led her to the streets, and how did she hold such wisdom within her? As videos spread across social media and the scene became a phenomenon, a new curiosity arose among those who had witnessed or watched on screen. Who was that woman after all? How could someone living on the streets possess such eloquence, such cultural baggage, such strength in her voice? A few days later, fragments of her story began to emerge. Journalists, students, and curious onlookers touched by the scene decided to investigate. And what they discovered was far more profound than anyone could have imagined. Her name, previously erased by the invisibility of the streets, was once again spoken with respect. She had not been just a street corner beggar. Years ago, she had been a literature teacher at a local public school. Her passion for words, especially classic works, had made her a role model for her students. Many remembered her vibrant classes in which Shakespeare, Camões, Machado de Assis, and so many others were presented not as cold texts, but as living experiences. Other accounts indicated that, in her youth, she had also performed in theater. Small independent groups in the city remembered her presence on alternative stages, always vibrant, always moving modest but loyal audiences. Her voice carried the cadence of art, and her gaze the depth of someone who understands that literature is, above all, a mirror of the human condition. So what happened to this talented and cultured woman to end up on the streets? The answer lay, not in a single tragedy, but in a sequence of life's hard blows. The loss of close family members, an abusive relationship, a lack of emotional support, and as with so many others, the relentless shadow of mental health issues. With each fall, fewer people reached out, until at a certain point there was no ground left. Only the cold sidewalk remained. It's painful to realize how society is quick to applaud talent when it's in the spotlight, but relentless in turning a blind eye when that same talent stumbles. The woman who moved audiences, who transformed students, was now just another statistic, and yet her essence had not disappeared. The art, the texts, the memory of the words that had so inspired her remained alive within her. Perhaps this was what kept her breathing amidst her abandonment. The certainty that, even in misery, there was something no one could take from her, the wisdom and dignity of her soul. Learning her story had an even greater impact. Many of her former students, recognizing their teacher in the viral video, wrote on social media, "She believed in me when no one else did. She was the one who taught me to love books. I will never forget her lessons." These were messages of gratitude, now mixed with the pain of seeing her in such a condition. And so, what seemed like an isolated incident on a busy street became a universal symbol. The scene wasn't just about a man's arrogance or a woman's unexpected talent. It was about the cruelty of indifference, how life can break even the strongest, and how art can be the last flame that refuses to go out. If you've made it this far, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like, and comment. I want to hear your opinion. How many great stories do you believe are hidden behind faces that society prefers not to see? Because, in revealing that woman's past, an uncomfortable truth emerged. Perhaps every corner hides a forgotten talent, a silenced voice, a life that could inspire the world, if only we were willing to listen. As the woman's story spread, taking on new dimensions and revealing an unexpected past, there was someone who couldn't escape the weight of that memory: the businessman. The scene he believed to be just a bad joke had become a landmark that exposed him, even without mentioning his name. Anyone present that afternoon would never forget the contrast. On one side, an elegant, arrogant man who mocked a stranger. On the other, an invisible woman who, with immortal words, silenced his arrogance and revealed his smallness. Reports say that after the recitation, the businessman was speechless. He tried to laugh again, but the sound wouldn't come out. He swallowed hard, lowered his eyes, and for a few seconds seemed to shrink before the crowd that now watched him in silence. He, who had been seeking an audience for his cruel spectacle, was now the target of disapproving looks. Some claim that days later he tried to find her again. He was reportedly seen wandering the same streets, discreetly inquiring about the woman who had recited Shakespeare. But when he finally found her, he couldn't utter a word. The weight of shame was greater than any gesture of repentance. Others claim he simply disappeared from the scene, perhaps hoping the episode would be forgotten. But how could you forget something that had already gone viral, reaching millions of people? There was no escaping it. His face, even if not clearly identified in the videos, was etched in the memory of everyone present. The businessman's shock wasn't just the surprise of seeing a homeless woman master Shakespeare. It was the reflection that moment offered him, an uncomfortable mirror revealing vanity devoid of compassion, pride laid bare before the greatness of the human soul. And perhaps that was the true punishment. Because public humiliation fades with time, but the memory of having laughed at someone who, seconds later, proved to be immensely superior in wisdom and dignity, that, yes, would not leave him alone. If this part of the story has already made you reflect, take advantage and subscribe to the channel and share this video because stories like this need to be told so that we never forget the power of empathy to transform perspectives and attitudes. And as the businessman grappled with his own silence, the scene reached a new level. It was no longer just about two characters on opposite sides of a street. It was about all of us, about how we look, judge, and so often make mistakes. On that New York street corner, something much bigger than a simple argument had happened. It wasn't just the story of a woman reciting Shakespeare to silence an arrogant businessman. It was a living metaphor for the world we live in, for how we judge, and for what we choose to see in people. Because how many of us, in our daily lives, have rushed past someone on the street without even imagining that behind that haggard appearance lies a life full of experiences, talents, pain, and dreams? How many times do we let ourselves be carried away by first impressions, without realizing that we may be standing before someone who carries within them a greatness that doesn't fit into stereotypes? The scene with that woman reminds us that human dignity isn't lost with torn clothes or the absence of a fixed address. True greatness isn't measured in bank accounts but in what the soul carries, and that, when revealed, is capable of transforming any environment. At that moment, Shakespeare ceased to be just literature. He became a cry, a protest, a living testament to the fact that a person's worth goes far beyond what the superficial eye can see. His words echoed as a silent denunciation of prejudice, but also as an invitation to compassion. And this is where the story reaches its climax. A collective awakening. Because it wasn't just the businessman who saw himself reflected in an uncomfortable mirror. Everyone who watched, live or on screen, was called to rethink their actions. How many talents have we ignored? How many stories have we missed? How many times have we been blind to the obvious? The truth is, in a world accustomed to measuring people by material possessions, that scene was a painful and beautiful reminder that human essence cannot be measured by appearance, that there are hidden treasures in places that haste and arrogance would never deign to seek. And perhaps that's precisely what makes this story so powerful. It's not just about a homeless woman, nor an arrogant man. It's about all of us. It's about the choices we make every day, whether we'll look with indifference or compassion, whether we'll laugh at others or reach out, whether we'll judge by their cover or delve into the depths of someone's story. If this reflection touched your heart, I ask you to like it right now, subscribe to the channel, and share this video. This way, more people can be reached by messages that remind us of what truly matters. Because, deep down, this story doesn't end on that sidewalk. It continues in every glance we choose to cast, in every judgment we choose to avoid, in every gesture of humanity we're still capable of offering. And while millions shared the video and commented on the power of that scene, one final question remained. What would have happened to the woman after all of this? After that unforgettable episode, the woman continued her routine on the streets of New York, but nothing would be the same again. The video of her recitation spread around the world, becoming a symbol of resilience, talent, and dignity. She, who had been ignored for so long, now received looks of respect and recognition. The businessman, in turn, began to reflect on his arrogance. There was no applause for him, no comments of admiration, only the silent weight of having underestimated someone whose greatness is not measured by status or money. What seemed like a moment of cruel humor turned into a life lesson, for him and for everyone who watched. And what do we learn from this story? that each person carries something unique within them, that we can't judge someone by their appearance, their visible past, or their social standing. That talent, wisdom, and inner strength can appear in the most unexpected places, including in those whom society has chosen to ignore. On every corner, on every street, there may be stories as grand as this, just waiting for a watchful eye, for a chance to be heard. Every gesture of prejudice can be transformed into a lesson, every scornful laugh into a lesson in humility, every slight into an opportunity for empathy. And that's exactly what makes moments like this unforgettable. The woman, with her voice transformed an everyday moment into something eternal, proving that true greatness isn't found in wealth, appearance, or title, but in the human essence. If this story touched your heart, be sure to subscribe to the Boer channel, like it, and comment below about what you would do if you were in that scene. We want to hear your thoughts because your participation is essential for more people to learn about stories that move and inspire. Remember, life is full of unexpected encounters. Each person we meet may carry within them a lesson, a talent, or a story capable of transforming our way of seeing the world. Don't ignore the invisible. Observe, listen, and above all, appreciate. And so, a simple New York street corner ceased to be just an ordinary place. It became a stage for emotion, reflection, and learning, a reminder that humanity reveals itself in the most unlikely moments, and that respect, empathy, and understanding are treasures we must preserve and share every day. So, if you want to, continue receiving moving stories like this. Subscribe to the channel now. Like, and comment. Every gesture of yours helps spread messages that remind us of what truly matters: humanity, dignity,